This past Sunday, I participated in my first simulated Lorcana draft. Despite very little experience in other TCGs and no experience in drafting, I almost won. Since we just got the official draft rules, I know a lot of you are looking for what a draft experience is like and what to look for when drafting, and maybe even what drafting is, period. So today, I'm going to show you how the format works, my slightly unconventional draft deck, and some of the key moments that show why certain cards absolutely shine in this format.
Balloons.
So how does draft work anyway? I will put the official rules from Lorcana up on the screen, but the short version is you draft one card at a time until you have 48 cards, and then you can cut up to 8, giving you your draft deck to use against your fellow drafters. Now, my draft was interesting as I was able to get several ramp cards from the first pack. On top of that, a few extra songs to pair with one jump ahead meant when Ursula's shell necklace came up, I took it without a second thought. So what deck did I end up with? In hindsight, I should have recorded the draft, but I thought it would be tedious and boring to watch. If you want to check the draft out from another perspective, Knives Nerd Corner was live streaming his view of the draft night, and I will link the VOD in the description below. First up, here are my 1 and 2 drops. Not much special here. The flower and the sword ended up as ink almost every time, and nothing really shined, but it's a bunch of commons and uncommons for 1 and 2 ink, so what do you really expect? My 3 and 4 drops were a little spicier. Of course, I have Detective Mickey for ramp, as I said before, Cheshire Cat and Kristoff as lore batteries to get me 2 lore every time they quest, and Jasper to help slow down my opponent. 2 copies of Jetsam, since evasive characters are a little harder to remove, and I had really hoped a Flotsam would come by, but it just didn't happen. Now, this package is the heart of my deck. Ursula's shell necklace, if I could get it out, stopped me from ever having to worry about top deck. With 9 songs, that meant songs were almost 25% of my deck. Not only that, but Grab Your Sword and Be Prepared are incredibly strong board control options, even in just standard Lorcana, so that means they are that much stronger in drafts since they're that much rarer. These 3 cards are really just filler garbage, but they're inkable, and I think I almost played Scar once? Not important. But these 3 cards, they are killer for helping you banish your opponents and keep the board under your control. As a result of all the ramp that I wanted to mulligan hard for, my ability to somewhat reliably continue to draw with Necklace, I was able to add these 6 big boys without fear. I believe most draft decks would not quite add this many high cost characters out of fear of being able to get that much ink down, but the point of the draft is to adapt based on the cards you are able to pick. Now that we've seen the deck, I want to point out some key moments, both good and bad, from my games. In Game 2 of Round 1, I made a big mistake that I hope we all can learn from. I was so excited about my shell necklace and songs combo that I forgot the #1 rule of the chaser is to slow your opponent down. So when you see me play out shell necklace when I have enough ink to play Grab Your Sword and clear one of the minis with the Mickey, it was a big mistake. In my head, I wanted to clear out Donald next turn after he quested, since 2 lore is much bigger than 1, but my opponent is able to drop a Musketeer Mickey, whose 7 willpower is far too much for me to overcome with no other characters on the board to help Detective Mickey challenge into him. In Game 3, due to the unique nature of my beefy deck, I was able to take home the win by having a 6 and 2 7 drops in my hand on turn 5, and allowed me to outpace my opponent. Many draft games come down to a war of attrition, so one possible strategy is having more top-end cards that are inkable so that drawing them early isn't an issue and drawing them late means you're top-decking better cards on average than your opponent. You just have to make sure that you don't end up with too many in your deck because you could break yourself early in the game and not be able to play anything at all. For Round 2, Game 1, I was able to drop a character card on turn 1, 2, and 3, while my opponent dropped one on turns 2, 3, and 4. Now this should mean that my opponent has the ability to make better trades than I do. Because of that, they want me to exert first, because if I do, they can clear my whole board and keep all of their characters alive. Knowing this, and the fact that I have Maui, Hero to All in my hand, I'm fine with using my characters as bait, and quests that they will clear my characters to exert theirs, opening them to be cleared by Maui. However, I realized I would rather clear Maleficent because, again, 2 lore, much more dangerous than 1, so I hold off on Maui and play Tui out. At first I thought leaving my Mickey to be cleared and not receive support from Tui was a huge mistake, but luckily my opponent thought that Musketeer Goofy that would protect them. Instead, I had the perfect counter. As you can see, Maui easily clears Goofy, supported Mickey clears 2 lore Maleficent, and I have been ahead on lore and board control. A Be Prepared to wipe the board later, and a Maui Demigod to finish him off, and I put away game 1. Game 2, we're again both able to play pretty well on curve, with my opponent's stats slightly better than mine, but getting my shell necklace out, as well as holding a Be Prepared until the right moment, means I have strong card advantage over my opponent. Meanwhile, they're relying on Beast Mirror to draw, which leaves you with only 1 card to choose from when you play. After building up my hand while letting him build up his board, I dropped the Be Prepared and marched to victory. You can clearly see why Be Prepared is such an impactful card in the draft format. For the finals, my first hugely helpful card was Zeus. He swung me from behind to ahead, which just goes to show how rush cards are enormous boons to draft decks. Game 2, I was able to double Detective Mickey and ramp up quickly to get out a 2e. I tried to be a racer, assuming that my opponent would attempt to clear Maui, but instead I learned a valuable lesson about card advantage in trying to race too early. And eventually, I was put away by a genie on the job that sent my Maui Demigod back to hand. Game 3, I had a not great hand. I had 2 sudden chills, and I probably should have inked them both. Discard cards are great, but they're much stronger if you go second and your opponent doesn't get that first turn draw. I went first. I instead ended up with all kinds of songs and no shell necklace to draw with them. I tried to Part of Your World Maui to stall out the board a little longer so that Be Prepared would get a much bigger board wipe, but in doing so I let my opponent get too much lower on the board and they had too much gas in the tank. There's a great play that shows why Tinkerbell Most Helpful, allowing me to clear this Goofy Daredevil, is a huge bonus of a card to have in your deck, but a second Goofy Daredevil was just too much for me to handle and my opponent took game 3. I hope you enjoyed this overview of my draft deck and how my first draft went. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them below in the comments or ask the Lorcana HQ Discord. There's a lot of varying opinions on draft at this point, but you can certainly glean something from what everyone has to say. I'll link to a few other helpful videos in the description as well from some of the other players in this draft that dive a little deeper into how each of the cards play. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.